Hey everybody, I'm Chef AJ and welcome to Healthy Living. My guest this evening is Matt Frazier. He is an author, entrepreneur, and vegan ultramarathoner, best known as the founder of the No Meat Athlete movement. He contributes regularly to the Huffington Post, and he and his work have been featured in books including Rich Roll's Finding Ultra, Brendan Brazier's Thrive Foods, Seth Godin's What to Do When It's Your Turn, and Heather Crosby's Yum Universe. Also featured in print magazines such as Runner's World, Trail Runner, and Canadian Running, and online publications including Forbes, Business Insider, WebMD, Shape, Competitor, Copyblogger, and Zen Habits. Matt's first book, No Meat Athlete, Run on Plants and Discover Your Fittest, Fastest, Happiest Self, was published by Fair Winds and has sold over 20,000 copies and reached #1 in Amazon's running and jogging category in October 2013. In 2015, Greatest, I'm not sure what that is, you'll have to tell me. Greatest named Matt one of the 100 most influential people in health and fitness. Matt works full-time on his business, No Meat Athlete, in Asheville, North Carolina, where he lives with his wife, 2 young children, and 2 rescued dogs. So please welcome Matt Frazier. Hi, Matt.
Hey, how's it going, AJ? Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm sorry to stumble. I should have read that, but greatest was spelled Greatist, and I didn't know what that was, so why don't you tell me?
Yeah, I guess that's a pun on kind of like an artist, but someone who is great.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a website. It's kind of like Mind Body Green. They publish lots of health articles every day. One of those type of sites.
Wow. Well, that is a very impressive resume, and I'm so glad that you have 2 rescued dogs. My rescued dog, Bailey's sitting on my lap. She always sits on my lap when we do the teleclass. So thank you for rescuing your dog. So I got to tell you, I literally read your book Sunday night on the plane coming home from speaking at a conference in Cleveland, and I really liked it. And I'm not just saying that because I know you and I like you. I thought it was a really good book, and can I tell you what I liked about it?
Yeah, good. Of course. I love hearing that.
Yeah, and then you're going to be doing most of the talking the rest of the teleclass. But I think it's a really accessible book for people. It was easy to read. I read it on the plane. I'll talk about the recipes first. What I liked is that you gave a lot of templates, and I really believe that cooking is not as hard as many people make it. And I think that the fewer the recipes, the better. People get bogged down on the idea of recipes. And a lot of your recipes, which they can also get on your blog, No Meat Athlete, are templates, like for your smoothie, for your energy bar, for your just. I love that idea. So thank you for that, because I think that's such a fun way to do stuff. Let people be a little bit creative, and so that was great.
Yeah, I like that too. I guess I like to think my background in school, it has nothing to do with nutrition. I was actually a math master's and working on my PhD when I stopped that to do No Meat Athlete full time. So I think that's sort of the mathematician in me, wanting to boil things down to a formula so that they can be recreated like an experiment.
I love it because then people don't have to stress about not having this ingredient or that ingredient, and it makes it so much more fun, and it gives them so many more recipes. What I also liked about your book, I love that you weren't afraid to take a stand on soda, and you just came right out and said how bad it was, whether it's diet or regular, that there really is no place for soda in a healthy diet, and I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, that and a few other things like it that just don't serve any good purpose at all, other than, being addictive and probably changing your chemistry and making you crave all different foods. So, and I don't know. That's one of those things that I think once you make the decision to give it up, at least for me, that was one of the first kind of foods I gave up, and I don't know. It doesn't take too long without it before you're just used to drinking water or something else.
Right. Exactly, but it is, like you say, I was addicted to both regular soda and diet soda, so I appreciate you saying that. And, I really loved you're going to tell your story, but I loved hearing it, how it came to be, that whole thing about the Boston Marathon, and that's a great story, so I'm going to let you tell it to our listeners. But one of the things I really liked about your book is it got me thinking about what is possible. So I don't know if I'm ever going to run, man, I'll be honest. I'm 55 and I've never run anywhere. And I'm asthmatic, and I'm not using that as an excuse, so I'm not sure that's going to be a sport for me. But one of the things I liked, and it got me so excited, is when you talked about running, you were talking about how it's something that people can do wherever they are. It's not like golf, like you compare it to like sports, like somebody being a great golfer or a great basketball player, that they're probably not going to be. but anybody can run. I mean, and I thought that was like so cool because I never thought about it that way, that people could, and they could get inspired and they could start where they were, and maybe they're not going to be like you or Rich Roll, but that they could do it, and it's something that in their lifetime that they could do and they could get better at and they could improve. And so I started thinking about that, and I thought, well, I'm probably not going to run being asthmatic or whatever, but what else in the fitness realm could I do that I'm not doing because I'm making these excuses that I can't do it? And then I started thinking, I thought, okay, well, maybe I can't run, maybe I'll never run, but why aren't I lifting weights? I was at this conference this weekend, and people were saying, you're too thin, and most of my life I've been hearing the opposite, you're too fat. So now everybody's saying, you're too thin, and I was wearing a dress, and I realized, I got really scrawny arms, and I started thinking, I could lift weights. I don't, but I couldn't. And just reading your book, the way you framed running, I thought, you know what? So I'm probably not going to be, Mrs. Universe, but that's no reason that I can't do something, And so that I like that about your book. And also, it's a very accessible book, and you're like the opposite of me. You don't hit people over the head. You're a little bit more inclusive. And so I thought it was a great book. But I really want you to start with your story because I thought, why were you so intent on wanting to run the Boston Marathon in the first place?
I don't really know why that was. It could have been that I bet friends money that I was going to do it when I first decided to run a marathon, not being a runner or anything like that, and missed it by so much that as nice as it felt to run a first marathon, I said I was going to. I told people, I wrote down on the form when you sign up for the marathon what's your projected finish time, and I wrote down 3 hours 10 minutes because that's what it took to qualify for the Boston Marathon. But not being a runner, I had no idea how hard that would be. And my first marathon actually took me 4 hours and 53 minutes. So I missed it by 100 minutes. And I guess, I don't know. I think it's one of those things where had I known at the outset that I would have missed it by that much, I never would have considered doing it. I would have realized what a huge goal this was. But once I had kind of made this commitment to it without being naive, just not knowing how hard it was, bet friends money, did all the stuff you're supposed to do as far as like creating accountability, letting everyone know you were going for this big goal. I just couldn't be okay with having missed it by 100 minutes. It was as much as it was nice to run a marathon, it felt like I had failed in some big way. So I don't know why after that point I thought I could do it. I just believed somewhere that I could do that. And that's kind of one of those things about running. I mean, maybe it's sort of deceptive in a way, but like you can imagine yourself running faster. At least I could imagine myself running 4 minutes per mile faster. I thought if I just get the training down and then learn how to eat right and all the stuff that ultimately took me 7 years to do, I could just see it happening. And ultimately it did, which I think is amazing. And in hindsight, I'm still amazed that I set that goal because that. Runners don't take that kind of time off the marathon. But I think just kind of not being a runner, not knowing any better, really turned out to be a blessing for me. So I mentioned that it took me 7 years to get there. Those first 4 years actually were just trying to run another marathon because it turned out that I was getting injured all the time, and it took me that long, a lot of frustration, a lot of starting a training program and then having to stop because I got hurt. And it was shin problems that I would just consistently have. But after 4 years, I figured out the running form thing, figured out how to train, which, by the way, meant running way, way slower than I was running. Because that was one of the reasons that I was getting hurt was I thought running was supposed to be fast. I thought if you're going out for a 3-mile run, you better come home being exhausted and not being able to go another step, or you didn't get a good workout in. That's for me is what running was, right? In gym class or sports teams, there was always this pressure to go fast. And if you were going to run, you were running so that you could finish as fast as you could. And what I had to learn was that does not work for endurance training. Maybe for someone who wants to run a mile and run their fastest mile, but if you want to run a half marathon or even a 10K or anything longer than that, most of your miles, 80% of them have to be at a pace that is so easy that you could carry on a conversation while you're doing it. And if you're going faster than that, you're going too fast, and you're basically asking for an injury, which is exactly what I was getting. So it took me a long time reading running books, all this stuff to go from non-runner to really understanding that. And once I figured that out, I started taking really major chunks of time off my marathon. But I got stuck at 3:20, which was 10 minutes shy of the Boston goal that I've been chasing for, I guess, 6 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, and like, so I had thought about going vegetarian before, and this wasn't vegan. I wasn't even thinking about vegan. I didn't even know that it existed. But I thought about it, but like everyone else, I thought, if I were to go vegetarian, and this was for ethical reasons, that's going to mean not enough protein, not enough calories, not being able to recover from all these workouts, and that if I did that, that would kind of be giving up on the Boston Marathon quest. So once I kind of plateaued though at 3:20 and just couldn't seem to, my progress really slowed at that point, and I just said, I don't know if I'm going to make it to Boston on my current path, so why not just eat the way that feels right for me, which meant not eating animals anymore. And, I fully expected that it was going to become a really bigger challenge and that maybe this would be the end of that Boston goal. But what was amazing to me was that right away I noticed that I was running faster once I started eating this way, which is shocking. I had no idea. I had started my website as an experiment and started blogging about what was going on, and I was able to write that I was getting faster and faster, and I just couldn't believe it. And really, it didn't take long. 6 months after that, after I went vegetarian, is when I took those final 10 minutes off of my marathon time and ran 3:09:59 and got into Boston. So that's
fantastic. Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah,
you wonder. Yeah, well, I think it's because I love that you had this goal for whatever reason, and that it's just always inspiring when people, achieve their goals. You wonder if you were able to cut time off your run by going vegetarian and ultimately vegan, how many athletes out there that are already great would be even greater if they changed their diet.
Yeah, and it seems that an increasing number are realizing that, and more are being willing to actually try it and see what happens. And it just seems like there's a lot of success that people are starting to experience, not just in these endurance sports, because it's sort of, I guess in hindsight at least, fairly obvious why it might work for endurance sports, because there's a tremendous advantage to being lighter when you've got to run 26 miles or 50 miles or 100 miles. If you can be 5 or 10 pounds lighter, which often is the result of going vegan especially, then that's a really good thing. If you can maintain your strength and endurance but be that much lighter, you're at a tremendous advantage. So that makes sense. But what I was really skeptical about was, like, would this actually work for sports that are more based on size and strength and quickness than on just having to run a long way or swim a long way? And it turns out that Mac Danzig in the I guess he's an MMA fighter, and he's in Forks Over Knives, and others like him are saying that because of the recovery benefits that with a plant-based diet, they can recover from workouts faster than they could without. And for them, for someone at an elite level, that means getting in more workouts than the competition. For someone more like my level, because by the way, I'm not by any means an elite athlete. Like a 4:53 was a very, very average marathon time, and I improved by a ton to be a good runner, but nothing close to an elite. So for someone like me, faster recovery doesn't mean more workouts, because I don't have a goal of getting in more than 5 workouts a week, but it means showing up to those workouts better recovered. So that translates into less chance of getting injured. Like if you show up and you're only 95% of where you should be, and after the next workout you're 90% of where you should be, over time that's just asking for an injury to happen. But if you can be 100% recovered when it's time, and that's what I really do believe that a plant-based diet does, especially, or I guess assuming that it is based on whole fresh foods and lots of vegetables and fruits and not just the junk food vegan, then it means way less chance of getting injury. And that's even since the Boston Marathon thing, I've gone vegan and gotten into ultra running. So I ran several 50-milers and even 100-miler, and found that I just stopped getting injured. It just has seemingly gone away. And I think so much of that has to do with diet. Certainly not all of it. Evolving as a runner is good, but I think diet has played a huge part.
I think diet is huge, even if you're not a runner, because I just know that, like my husband, myself, my sister, who all follow a whole food plant-based diet, we just never get regular sick anymore. Like when everybody else around us is getting flu shots and pneumonia shots, it just doesn't land on us. And I mean, I can't remember the last time I was sick. And if I feel like something coming on like a cold, it's like within 24 hours, I'm better. So it would make sense that would translate to, sports as well, like you were saying, the recovery time, I think.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we've noticed the same thing. It's one of those things, it's hard for me to spread the diet in that way. Like you tell people that you don't get sick anymore, and they're like, okay, what's next? Like, what other miracle cure is it? But it's absolutely true. That's what we've noticed in our family as well, that you just don't get sick anymore.
Yeah.
I think they're absolutely related.
If I was an athlete, especially one doing this for a living, you would think that they would at least want to try it just to see if it makes a difference. Do you think that it's still that athletes just think that without meat you're not going to get your protein? You think, I mean, especially in sports like bodybuilding, but do you think that's really what's going on, that they don't even want to try it because of this belief that without meat, you're not going to get your protein?
Yeah, I do think it's that, because it also goes up higher than the athletes themselves. Like, it goes to the coaches and the nutritionists, and some of those people are old school and have been around it for 40 years, and they're not going to change their opinion about that stuff no matter what the research says. But and I think especially among recreational athletes who yes, they're athletes, but they're also influenced by the same things that everyone else is. They're going to be slow to change, I think, for exactly those same reasons. Maybe even slower to change because of the idea that as athletes we need more protein, and that protein should come from meat. But I kind of do think that it's going to start and it already is, that in the highest levels, people want, there's a tremendous financial benefit to being a good athlete. And I think if people start to realize that this works, and I don't know that they will immediately. It might take a lot of good evidence that it does, but I think people are going to start chasing what works. And I think for that reason alone, we'll see it in higher levels of sports before it kind of trickles down then to more recreational people. But as I said, it really does seem like it is kind of changing over the past 10 years or so.
Yeah. It's funny, I spoke at a conference earlier this year. It wasn't a vegan one, but I was on this panel with somebody that was a medical doctor for a sports team, and like they were recommending bone broth and all this stuff. So I think you're right. It has to do with, not just the athlete, but what they're being told by the people that are, working with them and for them.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's possible. I mean, it's quite possible that some of that stuff is good. In the short term for athletic performance, that some of that is good. But sustainably, long term, what's it doing to your health? What's it doing to the longevity of your career? Same with the paleo diet. Yes, it works for losing weight sometimes, but it's, in my opinion, and a lot of other people's, not a good long term solution. So I think that's going to just kind of makes it cloudier and harder to see the change we'd like to see.
Yeah. So it's funny, Matt, in the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, every time people lose weight, the next thing they do is they start running races. It's so funny. I mean, before that never happened to me. I never had a desire. Do you think? What is so great about running? I just don't get it. It just seems like it's so hard. I go by foot like that.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, what I said about once you learn that you are supposed to actually run slow, it's quite possible that you'll discover that yes, it's still hard, it's still work, but it's not what you associate with running when you think of running. With from all the years of childhood as being forced to run fast, it can really be something that is energizing. And I can go out for a 5-mile run now and come back and feel more energy than when I left, because I got out there, moved at a pace, and because I've done it for a while, I can do it. And really, anyone who gets over the initial hump can find a pace, and it might involve walking sometimes, and that's totally fine, but can find that pace where they can carry on a conversation the entire time. And if you have the discipline to stay at that pace, and honestly, it is hard to stay that slow because it feels like you're barely moving, and when you go out for a run, a lot of times people want to go out and get a workout and feel like invigorated. But if you have the discipline to stay at that slow, steady pace, then you really get to a point where it feels like you can run all day at that pace. And it just can feel really good to move. And you can meditate your creativity is really stimulated when you kind of move at a pace that's like that, but not so fast that you get into this fight or flight response where all you can think about is when can I stop running because I can't go anymore. And you just get in a different mindset, and you get in a happy mindset. The endorphins start to flow, and it just feels good. So that's one thing. But the other thing is what I said in the book and what you kind of referred to, that with running, really I think almost anyone in the world who doesn't have a severe disability could train themselves to run a marathon if they had the discipline to go out there and do it, and the time and the willingness and commitment and all those things that go into it. But there's not a physical limitation for almost the entire population that would say this person doesn't have what it takes to run a marathon. And for me, that's what made it fun, is this vision of myself when I couldn't run more than 3 miles and had never run more than 3 miles. When I got this idea that if I just put in the time, that I could call myself a marathon runner and do that, because it seemed like a superhuman thing to me that someone could run that far when I could not run 3 miles without being totally winded. And I think that's probably what it is for the weight loss. I think when people get their body back and they get their energy back and it suddenly isn't quite so hard to move or move fast, I think people, I think they kind of get seduced by the idea that wow, I could actually run 13.1 miles and do that. And that was just unthinkable for someone maybe when they were 50 pounds heavier. So I think that's what it is. I think it's a really nice kind of tangible, visible way of showing yourself and showing other people, honestly, what you can do. So I think that's what's a really neat thing about it. Is if you just put in time, you can do something pretty remarkable.
Right. And unlike sports like skiing, I mean, other than your shoes, it's really a very affordable, way to exercise. And really, it did make me want to at least consider reading this book. It really did. It made it sound like, something that I live across the street from a park and people run all the time. 2 times around the track is a mile. I think it has to do with just, being an overweight kid and being shamed by PE T-shirts. Running just. But I might do it, someday. I will. But I mean, if anything's going to inspire me, it's your book. It's funny. I like when you said that when you said the days where running is the last thing you feel like doing are the days when sucking it up and making it happen will benefit you the most. I like that. I think that's true for a lot of things. Yeah.
It probably is. Running is where I've most noticed it, where you just don't feel like running that day. You get home from work or whatever, and you just don't want to do it that day because the day went badly, or you've got a million other things that are on your mind. And often I have my wife to thank. She urges me to just get out and do it because she knows that I'm going to be better for it. And those are the days when you get out there and you actually don't want to stop running, which I never, ever thought would happen because I used to hate it as a kid. But, yeah, you get out there, and like I said, the biochemistry starts to change a little bit. I like to listen to podcasts or music when I run, and it's a really nice escape. It's in the same way that meditation is. It can be exactly what you need in the times when you don't feel like doing it. So I do love it for that.
So your wife, Erin, is a runner too, right?
She is. She's done 3 marathons, all before we had children. And just really now that she's lost all this weight, has kind of been really excited to get back into it. She hasn't done another one yet, but I know she's going to soon.
Wow. Do your kids run? They're pretty young.
Well, my son's 5 and my daughter's 2. I actually went for a run with both of them 2 days ago. We went out in the rain and did a few laps around our neighborhood. So they love it, which I think is so cool because like I said, I hated it when I was a kid. It would seem like the most boring, painful thing you could do. So I love that my son, asked if we can go out for a run and just wants to do it. So I think that's so wonderful.
That's so cool. And I assume you're raising them on a plant-based diet as well. I mean, I'm pretty sure you are. So
of course.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we have so many people with kids that are like, same thing. Where are they going to get their protein? All this stuff. So you have 2 really healthy, happy kids eating plants.
Yeah, absolutely. They are very happy, and the same thing we've noticed about, as you mentioned, about getting sick. We've noticed it with our kids. They don't get the ear infections and all the other stuff that all the other kids get. So I don't know if that's the reason, but it's interesting.
I think that has to do with the no dairy. You know, you talk a lot in your book about habits and building habits, which I thought was great. And when you said that every time you lace up your shoes and get out the door, you're building the neural pathway that will eventually become an automatic habit of exercising. And I love that because I love psychology stuff, because so much of this is the psychology, because I didn't exercise for 52 years. And like you say, you know, it had to become a habit. Now I don't not exercise.
Right. Yeah. And I think especially people who, I don't know, did you have food addiction issues before?
Food addiction my whole life, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think people who have that addictive side to them, it can be really hard to start exercising or start eating well, whatever, but then kind of once you get it down, then you're addicted to it, and then you've got that going. And I don't mean in a bad way, hopefully.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. And I think some people who just don't get addicted as easily to bad or good things. But you know, I'm sure that's part of the reason why you don't not exercise.
Right.
Yeah, it's a really kind of counterintuitive thing. We think when we get inspired to make a change, and I am as guilty of this as everyone else. When we get inspired and we want to change our diet, or we want to, something just says, I want to make this change. And then what I'll do is say, well, if I'm going to lose weight, or if I'm going to start exercising, I'm also going to start eating healthily. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to get up earlier, and I'm going to start meditating. And I get inspired, and I have all these changes I want to make, and suddenly I don't have the patience to allow any of them to take more than a day. Suddenly I'm going to change all of them tomorrow. And when we do that, we massively strain our willpower muscles, because willpower is a thing that can be quantified. It can be exhausted, just like a muscle in a gym. It needs time to recover, and if you exercise it correctly, give it the time it needs to recover, then you can actually increase your willpower over time. So it's just like a muscle in the gym, but we think of it as something that if we just try hard enough, we should be able to have in limitless quantities. And we just have, if we just suck it up and do it. So that's how people want to change. And so many people, like I see them all the time on my website, who find about this diet, they see the results people get, and they decide overnight that they're going vegan. And actually, AJ, I think we probably differ a little bit on this, but I often encourage people, I say, actually, I think you're more likely to succeed, and I know you're more likely to succeed if you will take it a little bit slower and give yourself a month to get there. Or what I did, I took a whole year where I stopped eating beef and pork. And and this is when I was afraid about the protein thing. I kept the chicken breast in my diet so that I could keep getting that protein. I certainly didn't need to wait a whole year, but for me, that worked really well. And then I took a month of just having fish in my diet before I finally eliminated that and was left with just plants. So I tend to think that people who take a long time to make a change actually are more likely to make it stick. And it's for the reason that you said, that like every time you do a habit, you're getting a little bit, you're making that pathway stronger. So every time I went to a restaurant and ignored the beef and pork part of the menu, I kind of strengthened that, and it wasn't a hard thing. It didn't require willpower. It was very easy because I had the whole other half of the menu to order off of. Whereas I think if someone goes in the next day and suddenly you're vegan now and your whole lifestyle's changed, and the restaurant that you like, you can only get the salad there, and even that you've got to get a special dressing on or something. That's a major change. That takes a lot of willpower, and it does drain it. Some people get the results fast enough that they can make it through that, and those positive results that they're getting in terms of weight loss or energy or just how great they feel, that kind of can outweigh how difficult it is to make a big change like that. But I think a lot of people would do better if they would take it slower and just kind of lessen the demand they're placing on their willpower and give that habit time to develop.
Well, you have a whole chapter 7, on how to make running a habit, and I almost think that what you wrote could apply to just how to make anything a habit. Like you said, choose a daily trigger, start small, make it enjoyable, recording and rewarding, and not trying to change other habits at the same time. I think this would work for things other than running.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, it gets a little more complicated when you're trying to quit something. Right? That's a little bit different than just trying to add something into your life. But yeah, of course, it would work for just about any habit. Running happens to be a particularly good example because it's really easy to short, like if someone's goal is to run an hour, well, it's really easy to tell someone just go run for 2 minutes this first day. And that's how, exemplifies how small the steps are that I think you should take when you're changing a habit. If you're trying to tell somebody to go vegan and that's the ultimate goal, it's kind of hard. It's not quite as clear-cut as, well, just take go vegan and divide it by 30 and you'll have exactly what you should do on the first day, which is kind of what you can do with running. So that's why I like that example. But you're right. It could go for just about anything. The principles are almost universal.
What do you mean by choose it? Can you explain, like, choose a daily trigger? What does that mean?
Yeah, so that there's a great book called The Power of Habit by a guy named Charles Duhigg. And in that, he makes this concept clear. He didn't invent it, but it's a concept that has been noticed, that there's something that people call a habit loop in our brain. And the idea is that it's 3 parts. There's first the trigger. There's the thing that causes you to, remember, when we talk about a habit, we're talking about something that you do more or less automatically. So there's
like brushing your teeth, you mean like brushing your teeth, for example?
That'd be perfect. Yep. So the stimulus for brushing your teeth usually is you wake up, or whatever your morning routine is. Maybe you take a shower, get out of that shower, and then you immediately brush your teeth. Or maybe for you, it's as soon as your feet hit the floor, when you get out of bed, you go brush your teeth. But we have this thing, and as soon as our feet hit the floor, or as soon as we dry off in the shower, we more or less mindlessly go brush our teeth at that point. And the third part of this loop, I don't know quite how strong it is in brush your teeth, but I guess it is there, maybe in the form of just your mouth feeling clean and the bubbles going to work. But there's the reward, right? So you have this stimulus, then you do an action, and then you have some sort of reward for it. And eventually, at the beginning, those rewards can be extrinsic. Like it could be a reward for going for a run. Maybe you, watch TV, have a beer, eat a piece of chocolate, whatever. Again, if you have any sort of food addiction issues, I don't think a food reward is the answer. But eventually, hopefully that reward becomes intrinsic. And running after months of it or weeks of it becomes its own reward. Or whatever, eating healthily. And I think anyone listening to this who's gone, improved their diet probably knows this feeling where at first it's a struggle to eat well, but eventually it actually starts to become its own reward. It feels good, and you feel a sense of gratification for having eaten a good meal and not overeating. So that's a loop that causes habits to form, and they don't usually happen consciously. But a stimulus will happen. We'll do something else more or less mindlessly following that stimulus. Something about doing that will give us a reward, will feel good to us, and the next time that stimulus arises, we are pretty likely to repeat that exact same pattern, just because that's how our bodies are wired. It serves a good purpose why we would form habits like that. So when you're trying to change a habit, you can kind of engineer it. And if your goal is to do a run, don't just say, or let's say your goal is run every day. Don't just say, I'm going to run every day whenever, or whenever I can fit it in, or whenever I feel like it, or whenever I remember to do it. But take the time when you want to run and figure out what is the trigger that's going to immediately precede that. It could be the first thing in the morning if you want. That works particularly well. It could be as soon as you get home from work, you feel like maybe your work day isn't done because now you have to go for your run. And once you get back from that, then you're really done for the day. All different things could be a trigger. But it's got to be something that happens consistently. It doesn't necessarily have to happen at the same time every day, although that helps because if the environment, the amount of daylight, everything else going on in your life, if all that stuff is consistent, the habit's going to form faster and easier. But it does not have to be exactly the same time every day, as long as it does happen every day, assuming every day is your goal.
How long do you think it takes to build a habit? You hear things like 21 days, but that's not long enough, right? You need more time than that.
Yeah, I think it depends on a lot of factors, including the strength of the trigger and probably more the strength of the reward. How rewarding does it feel to you when you do it? Someone can develop a drug addiction after 1 or 2 times because that reward that happens immediately is just so powerful that it's hijacking their brain basically. So I think it depends a lot on that. It depends on how difficult the habit is, and it depends on frequency, right? So if your goal is to become a 3 times a week runner, it's actually going to take longer to develop that as a habit than it will to become a daily runner, because the daily thing, 100% of your days, you're reinforcing this habit loop. Whereas if it's only, more sporadically, then it's going to take you more time to do it before it really does start to feel like a habit. And when you've got 2 or 3 days in between where the trigger happens but the habit doesn't happen, that serves to kind of break it down. So, I think it depends on so much. I think for my own self, I tend to think of about a month or so. So when I say don't try to change more than one habit at a time, usually I give myself a month per habit. And once I've done something for about a month, then I'll sort of give myself permission to try to take on something new.
Well, that makes sense. You have some beautiful colored photos at first when you open the book. There's a couple jumping out of the plane. Is that you by any chance?
No, that's not me. I've never skydived. I would like to do that one day.
Wow.
I bungee jump, and never done that.
Oh, that sounds really scary. Now, there's also a photo of what looks to be like somebody's calf muscle with your really adorable No Meat Athlete logo with a running carrot. Now, is that your leg?
That is not my leg. I would never do that. I think people are crazy who get that, but I think they're awesome too. I've met like 5 or 6 people, and I think there are 7 or 8 out there in the world of people who've gotten that tattooed on their body somewhere.
They should pay you for copyright, but I had to ask because I thought maybe that was you and Aaron jumping out of a plane. Maybe I thought that was your leg getting a tattoo.
No.
I
love other people do the crazy stuff.
That's okay. I have a tattoo, but it's Scooby-Doo. So, it's cool because it really was an inspiring book when you got into all the psychology, because you said most people never take any action because they set their goals too low. They don't set goals that don't excite them to the core. And I never thought about that way, because I always thought that people failed because they set their goals too high. So talk about that. I like what you're saying here. It does really make sense when I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's something that's really been studied much, or that it would be very easy to study. It's hard to study the sort of social things because you don't have a laboratory for them. But yeah, I think I grew up with that idea that from grade school workshops or whatever we would do, that goals should be attainable. And to me, I don't know if this is what they meant by attainable, but to me it meant don't set your goal too high because you just might fail and then be disappointed and be embarrassed and all these other things. And I just think that's such a terrible message that we give to kids or anyone else. That it's like don't expect too much of yourself because you'll probably let yourself down. I think you should bet on yourself. I think it's so much better to do that. And I think if you can suspend disbelief for a little while, even just a few minutes, to the point where you could convince yourself you really could qualify for Boston when in fact anyone quote-unquote reasonable would say you can't, and then you take a few steps during that period of extreme confidence or motivation, and like betting friends' money that you're going to do it. I think you can kind of set things up so that your eventual success is maybe inevitable isn't the right word, but way more likely than if you were to just set something that was not an exciting goal. And the example that I'd like from my own experience of this is that had my goal been run a 4-hour marathon, which is a good marathon time, but not exceptional, that doesn't carry with it the prestige or mystique that a Boston marathon qualification does. Had that been my goal, then I think after that first marathon, I probably would have never run another one, because, as I said, it took me 4 years to figure out running and get back to another marathon. And during that 4 years, I had all these injury issues. I talked to a physical therapist friend of mine who urged me not to try being a runner. He said, your body's not built for this. Your legs are the wrong shape for this. This is not your sport. Go pick something else. Just, like a normal person, find something else that actually suits your body. And I think at that point, I'm sure at that point, that if my goal had been run another marathon or run a 4-hour marathon, if that had been my goal, and it didn't have all this crazy level of inspiration and motivation attached to it, like Boston had for me, where I would dream about it or go to bed thinking about it, couldn't wait to get up and work on it. If I wouldn't have had that kind of desire, then I think the physical therapist saying you're not meant to be a runner probably would have been enough for me to stop trying to be a runner. So
wow.
I think there's so much power in having a goal that you have to believe that it can happen, absolutely. But if you can just, I don't know, it's when you visualize it, and if you're able to kind of visualize it, and you can make your heart speed up or your palms sweat because it's so exciting to imagine yourself achieving this thing. I think that carries so much more power, and I really do believe you are more likely to achieve that than you would be likely to achieve one that was halfway between where you are now and whatever that really far out exciting goal is. Because the obstacles are going to come up either way. Right? It's going to be hard at some point. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to even be setting a goal. You could just go do whatever it is. There are going to be obstacles, and I think if you've got that goal that's really, really inspiring to you for whatever reason, then that's the one where you're going to plow through those obstacles or just find a way no matter what it takes to get around those obstacles. That's the one where it's going to do it, not the modest achievable goal.
Right. So what goals are you setting now that you've gotten Boston out of your system? What are your goals?
For a long time, it was run a 100-miler. That was one that was very difficult, and for a while I thought I wouldn't be able to do it, even after having announced on my blog that I was going to do it. I even signed up for a race that I ended up not running because I just couldn't get myself to go out there and train. And I think, I don't mean to say that you can never set a goal that's too big. It's quite possible that you can set a goal that's too big. Had my goal been qualify for the Olympics, which would have taken a whole another hour faster off my time, that type of goal, for me, at least on a gut level, would have been something where I said, there's just no way I can do this. Like, I'm just not gifted enough physically to do that. And I think because the action's not flowing, right? So if the goal's too big, then you're not going to do anything towards it. You're not going to be really motivated by it and to get out there the next day and train again or do whatever it takes to get to it. I think when action flows from it, right? When you've set the right size goal, because you are taking action towards it. To me, that means you've found exactly where it should be. So anyway, I think for a while that 100-miler for me was too big of a goal, and that's why the first time I signed up for one, I really never even started training. I just couldn't get myself to do it. The action just wasn't happening. So took a few more years than I expected to get to it, but eventually I did start to put the training in and put the time in, and eventually got that done. So that was a huge accomplishment for me. It's something I had always wanted to done, because 26.2 miles, a marathon, that seems superhuman to me. So when I found out people could also run 100 miles, it was that's just mind-blowing. I thought it was a typo the first time I read it, that people were doing 100-mile races. So once I started to say, hey, maybe I could do that, it just became really, really exciting. And although it took a while, I did eventually get that done.
I can't even imagine driving 100 miles, let alone running. I mean, do you ever get to go to the bathroom? I mean, 100 miles. Do you stop to eat? Do you stop to pee? I mean, I can't fathom 100.
You do all that stuff. A lot of people treat it almost more like a hike than a run. But it would take a really long time if all you were doing was hiking. So you do have to run some of it. But yeah, you stop and eat whatever you want. I stopped a few times to get my shoes changed. People sometimes will take naps during these things because they're ready to quit. And that's a slightly better alternative than quitting, is just take a nap and see how you feel. Because really that's what these things are about at a level like mine, where it's not trying to win the race, but the goal is finish this race no matter what it takes. And
that must be so gratifying. I mean, I just can't imagine how gratifying that must be to do that.
Yeah, it really is. It teaches you lessons and kind of the ability not to quit, the ability to persevere, that I think carry over into so many other parts of your life. You just kind of realize that when it feels like you cannot go on anymore, and that's what these things are. Once you're past mile 50, that's what the whole second half is. It's basically these games with your brain where your body's telling you have to stop, and it would be so nice just to stop now. And your brain has to say, I'm not going to do that because I have all these good reasons why I don't want to stop and why I'm not going to stop no matter what. And that, for me, has just carried over into so many other things and been so valuable to have that ability.
It sounds almost like running's a metaphor for life,
Yeah, like anything. But running, I think, for those who do run and put some time into it and achieve some goals of it, I think it definitely does become that. And that maybe becomes the reason for doing it, which for me, it definitely is.
Did you ever see the movie with Kevin Costner called McFarland USA?
I just saw the previews for it. My wife and I saw that on I don't know,
Netflix?
Amazon Prime or something. Yeah. I don't know what it's like, but we were ready to get it, and we're like, we're going to save it, but we are going to watch that.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I don't know if a lot of people saw it. It came out, I believe, last year. It was one of the best movies I've ever seen, and it's a true story about a track team in Central California. And I hope everybody. It's one of those movies. I mean, I cried the whole movie. Not that it was even sad. It was just so inspiring, and it was about running. So anybody that's interested in running, and I'd love to talk to you after you see it, because it was just so inspiring. It's about what, I love movies to show what, the human spirit and what people can do. And it was just a great movie. So
yeah, I do. Hey, I will absolutely watch that.
Other than running, do you do anything else, like any stretching, yoga, or is it you're just a running kind of guy?
I mean, I like yoga type stuff now and then. And I do like to get into the weight room and do some lifting and stuff. And before I was a runner, when I was in college, I was really into bulking up. I've always been kind of a skinny, lean guy, and I like bulking up in the weight room and doing really hard lifts and pushing it really hard. And just like I mentioned with food earlier, where it's this thing that seems painful gets to the point where it is gratifying for its own sake. I discovered that lifting weights could be that, which is really a strange thing for someone who was never into fitness at all. I do like it for that reason. It does feel. It's fun. So weightlifting is something I do. I played golf and baseball and stuff as a kid, but as far as, I guess, semi-serious sports, running is really the only one I do nowadays.
Right. Well, good. So in your book, which was written, I believe, 3 years ago or maybe 2 years ago, you were a little bit more moderate in your views with oil. But then I recently was interviewed on your wonderful podcast. Do you think if you were writing it today, maybe you'd be a little bit more like, hey, maybe this isn't the best thing in the world?
I would. I mean, I think probably what I would do, just because of the way that I kind of like to spread the message gently, is I probably would kind of just not put the oil in the recipes, and or even if I had it in there, like emphasize the alternatives more.
Sure.
Yeah, I've come around with that.
Yeah, because people look. My first book had a ton of desserts made with dates and nuts and chocolate, but I wrote it 4 years ago. If I was writing it today, we change, we grow. As we learn better, we do. I was just curious because it's still great.
If there were one change I feel that I could make, that would be it. I would lessen that, and I don't know that I would preach that it is a bad thing, but I would definitely just keep it out of the recipes for the most part.
Sure. Just curious. You when you talked about the goal setting and about recording and rewarding, I never thought about that, how it could be gratifying to do that, because you were saying that placing a single X in a box that signifies you completed your activity today can be deeply gratifying, especially if it's in a highly visible place where you'll see it throughout the day. And I never thought about that. I've set goals and I've done it, but that's just sort of a reminder that, hey, you did this. That's kind of cool. It's like when your kid gets sent home with a gold star or something.
Yeah, right. It's really nice, especially like when you get a streak going, because aside from the gratification, then you get 8 red X's on your calendar. You don't want to break it, right? And suddenly you'll do whatever it takes to get a workout in, or the run in, or not eat a certain food, or whatever it is. You get that streak going, and you just don't want to break it. I think we neglect to use those visual clues a lot, those visual rewards.
Is it okay? Can I feel that? I'll give you credit, but can I feel that? Because in my Ultimate Weight Loss program, we're starting 63 days of abstinence on Halloween because we want to get through the holidays. And I'm thinking that could be just a great thing where they just put, like, what would you suggest, like a red X on the calendar every day? They're compliant, like, or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and don't credit me. Credit Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian. It's people know that as the Seinfeld technique, because I think he has a quote where he talks about it and says, I think it was for his doing his joke writing or whatever it was, that he would say, every day I'm going to do this, and every day I do it, I'm going to reward myself with a big X on the calendar. And I think you can.
Yeah, I think it's great. I'm thinking maybe instead of an X, though, a heart, just because to me an X almost looks like, I don't know, maybe something that's meaningful for them. But I was thinking about that, and I'm like, this is a great idea. I'm going to start doing that,
Yeah, and I think, to an extent you do, right? Because I know Erin, when she was doing Ultimate Weight Loss, would do the logging her food every day on that, whatever the app was. And it's not quite the same, but she could go at the end of the day and look at her food that she ate today and be really proud of how great that looked, right? How clean it looked. Yeah. So there is that visual reward. And And along those same lines, if anything like this, if you can do it in a kind of a public setting, so like you could have a spreadsheet for anyone who's in this challenge, and could all record it, whoever's comfortable doing it, could record those X's on the same, Google spreadsheet or someplace where people see it, and then you kind of get that other aspect into it that other people are more of an accountability thing.
I do agree with you, though, for anything, whether it's weight loss or starting a fitness regime, when you make your goals public, it's a lot harder to fail because you went out there and said to everybody you're going to do it,
Yeah, and I mean, that's not to say that you won't fail, and that means it's failure-proof, because I did that exact thing, and I failed 6 different times at qualifying for Boston, and it was embarrassing, right? It was hard to handle that for a few minutes, maybe even a few hours after those marathons, because it felt like, wow, I really kind of told everyone I was going to do this, and here I am failing at it. But when I look back at the whole quest, I think that's the reason that after those failures, after that first failure, I didn't say, well, that was fun, but that's enough for me as a runner. It was like I told everyone I was going to do this, and it eventually became part of my identity, and my friends knew me as the guy who was on this quest to do this thing. So, like, even if you're failing, facing the embarrassment, that is what keeps people from doing that public commitment to goals. Even when you're facing that in the short term, that public commitment still can be what brings you back, so that you're not having the real ultimate failure. It's just little failures along the way, but that are ultimately building up to the big success.
Right. I don't know if it was from your book that I read or just saw something, but like they'll talk about like Olympic athletes or famous ice skaters, and we see them do these gold medal routines, but they've fallen down 3,000 times to get there,
Right.
And we forget about that. And, when I think about my life, I haven't really had any fitness goals, but I remember since I was the age of 7, I kept saying I'm going to be on the Tonight Show. And when I was on 27 years old, I was. And I had no idea at 7 years old how the heck I was going to get on Johnny Carson. But it was a goal, and I didn't know much about goals, but I just kept saying, I'm going to be on the Tonight Show. And I really, really did believe it, and eventually I manifested it. So I think the take-home message is have goals, people, because without goals, you're never going to achieve anything, really.
Yeah, and I mean, people fight me on that all the time and say that when you're so goal-oriented, you can't possibly, appreciate the moment or be satisfied with yourself as you are. And I think what the concept people miss, or that I really do believe in, is that you should untangle your happiness from these goals. So have huge goals, definitely, but don't make your happiness depend on them. Do things like meditation. Do things like being mindful, enjoying the moment, spending quality time, all these things. Do them and get your happiness from that. Let the goal be something else. Have a vision for a goal, for sure, but don't make your happiness depend on it. And I know it's not a simple thing to separate, but yeah, that's what I do. Yeah,
I think that's great. And the only reason I was finally, after the age of 52, successful at weight loss is because I failed the first 50 years. So it's like I think anybody that's successful, they just weren't born that. I mean, people have different gifts, obviously, and different skills. But it's just I love your whole analogy about running. That it's like, with few exceptions, anybody can do it. And if you can't run, you walk. And I think that's just a great metaphor for life. I really, really do. I really love the book. People will get it.
I like what you said. I like what you said about failing for 50 years, because I think the difference between people who succeed or who look like they succeed and those who fail is that the people who fail quit, right? I mean, they get a small failure and they decide that's enough, and I'm done, and this is too painful. But the person who succeeds says, okay, I did fail, and that was a complete failure. What can I learn from that? And in my next attempt, which is happening now, what can I do differently? And then the constant the whole time, and then eventually you're going to get there.
The only failure is to not try. I think it was Willie Nelson. He didn't become really successful until his 40s, and he always said, man never fails. He only quits trying. And I've always remembered that.
I've never heard that, but that's perfect.
Yeah, I love it. So I just have to ask you this because I ask almost everybody, and especially because you're an athlete, and I know people are so worried where you're getting your protein. What does Matt eat in a day? And like, is it different on days that you run and don't run, or are you pretty consistent, kind of like with your what you eat every day?
It used to change more than it does. Like when I was in the intense training, I would definitely consciously eat more calories on those days. I would eat, always do a pre-workout meal. So like within the hour before the workout, I'd be eating a lot of fruit or fruit juice or smoothie even. And then in the hour after the workout, I would intentionally eat a lot of food, even more than I was hungry for, because for me, without having weight issues, I knew that was what I needed to really get the most out of each workout and to recover so that 2 days later I could be ready to go just as hard again. So yes, it did change them. Nowadays, though, with the 2 kids and just with priorities being different for me, I don't have right now a huge, exciting running goal like that. I kind of do it, just for fun and for overall well-being and for kind of what it does for me mentally as well as physically. So nowadays, it doesn't vary that much day to day. But typical for me is a lot of fruit in the morning, handful of nuts maybe. Sometimes I'll make them into a smoothie, sometimes I won't. That's kind of a typical breakfast. Maybe mid-morning I'll eat a pita with some hummus. We get some nice oil-free hummus around here, which is nice. We have a good local company that makes that. Lunch often is going to be like a big giant salad with a half a can of chickpeas on it, some kind of tahini dressing, very common one. If we had leftovers from the previous night's dinner, sometimes I'll eat that for lunch. Then let's see, lots of fruit throughout the day. That's kind of my just thing that I go to as a snack, just whatever fruit we have lying around. And dinner, I guess very typical for us is either a pasta dish, a rice and beans dish. We like cooking, so we'll try different stuff, Indian food, Thai food. We like to make that stuff at home and fool around with it. And then I almost never eat dessert. I just, for some reason, don't have the sweet tooth. I don't know why.
No,
never really.
You're so lucky. You're so lucky, Matt. Boy, you're lucky. It's funny because I've interviewed about 100 people now, mostly people that are plant-based, and it's interesting how fairly simple and similar they all eat,
Yeah, it's fine. I did, on my podcast, my co-host and I did like a what we eat in a day, and we didn't know what each other was going to say, and we were saying like exactly the same things for each meal. So, I think, so I guess once you get towards whole foods and plant-based, there's a lot of variety. It's just, I guess they're pretty easy to fall into those certain types of meals. I don't know.
So you mentioned your podcast. Tell our listeners how they can find you, your podcast, your website, your book, things like that.
Sure. Yeah, everything I do pretty much is under the name No Meat Athlete. The book is called No Meat Athlete. It's at Amazon. It's at Barnes & Noble, places like that. NoMeatAthlete.com is my main place on the web. It's my blog. All the new podcast episodes go there as well. Podcast is called No Meat Athlete in the iTunes Store. We're on Facebook, also called No Meat Athlete. Twitter, No Meat Athlete. And the one different one is Instagram. We are No Meat Athlete _official.
So many parents tell me they can't feed their kids healthfully because they're picky and they won't like the food. Tell me what that's been like raising your kids on basically a whole food plant-based diet.
Sure. So our daughter, who is 2, is not picky at all. And I think the reason is because we were vegan when she was born. So nice. That's the reason. And we were already kind of getting into the whole food thing, and we weren't eating any junk food. So she'll eat beans and vegetables and just that. She loves that stuff. So she's not picky at all. Our son, who is 5, we were vegetarian when he was born, not yet vegan. So he drank milk for his first few years, and we did also like plenty of like the Gardein, like the fried chicken tender things with him, just because we kind of didn't know better. We weren't where we are now, as far as just like realizing how important it is to eat whole food and almost nothing but whole foods. So he's definitely got a taste for the fried and salty stuff and things like that. But basically, we just don't have those. We just don't have those options around the house. And right. I think it was Dr. Furman who wrote somewhere that the way to get kids to eat healthy is just only put the healthy stuff in front of them. And you might have to deal with a few tough nights, but they're going to eat if that's all that's in front of them, right? I mean, eventually they're going to decide that I'd rather do this than starve. And right. I guess it would take a lot of some very tough parents to do that, to push your kids to that point. And I personally would not know how to do that myself. I'm much more of a softie than that. But we just try to only have healthy food around, and we learned pretty quickly not to say oh, you don't like this dinner, well then here's this one that we know you do like. Here are these Gardein chicken tender things again that we know you do like. So once you got the idea that there weren't other options, it was either eat this or you're not going to get much food, then then he's been totally fine. So really, he's a great eater now. He's not quite the same as my daughter. He doesn't like beans. It's his big hang up, and I just wish he would, because I always, I tell him I scare him with the protein stuff the way everyone always did with me. And I say, you gotta get your protein.
With the beans. Tell him the beans will propel him to run. Tell him the beans will make him propel him to run even faster.
That's what I do. But that's exactly what we do.
But that's great. So many parents just cave, and like they say, they will give their kids so many options. And like you say, if they just tough it out, kids won't starve, guys. They won't starve.
Right. Yeah, and it's hard. I understand why it is hard. But I don't know. After a couple nights of like being, eating half of it and then saying, I don't like this, I don't want any more, and that being all they get, they learn pretty quickly that like you eat what's there, and then they enjoy it. They learn to enjoy it. That's the important thing. If they didn't, it would be a real problem and it'd be miserable. But they do.
And I think the longer the parents wait, the more ingrained the bad eating habits are, and the more difficult it is to make the change to healthy foods.
Oh yeah, definitely, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, gosh, it's just been such a pleasure getting to know you and Aaron and talking to you, and I love your book, and I hope everybody, you don't have to be a runner to get this book. There's some great recipes, and it's just a great book, No Meat Athlete. So thanks so much for writing it, and hopefully you'll write another one, and we can talk about that soon.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you so much for having me, AJ. This has been fun, and always nice to talk to you too. I really appreciate what you've done for us.
Well, thank you, and thanks all of you for listening to Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious.